All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the ultimate tips and tricks for building incredible scrollytelling experiences that don't absolutely destroy your website's performance. Look, we've all seen those gorgeous, immersive web pages where the story just beautifully unfolds as you scroll. But behind the scenes, there's a really delicate balance between visual magic and total technical disaster. So why should we care? Well, think about this number, 53%. That is the staggering chunk of mobile users who will just bounce if a page takes a mere 3 seconds to load. And honestly, one of the biggest culprits behind these slow, frustrating load times, you guessed it, cheap, poorly engineered scroll effects. And as the folks over at WebVise put it, cheap scroll animation is literally a performance tax. When you just slap on a parallax plugin or some quick fade-in effect without understanding the underlying browser mechanics, you are actively tanking your core web vitals. You're basically driving your users away before they even get to see your content. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the scroll performance trap, move into storytelling design tips, explore some slick developer tricks, maximize our scroll performance, and finally, polish it all off with accessibility. Kicking things off with part 1, the scroll performance trap, and exactly why cheap motion fails. Look, when you rely on cheap scroll effects or aggressive scroll jacking, you are essentially picking a fight with the browser. You're forcing the main thread to run heavy JavaScript and recalculate page layout on every single frame. The result? It completely tanks your interaction to next paint, or INP scores. It creates that awful, jittery feeling where the page shifts out of nowhere and the user's thumb feels totally disconnected from the screen. Moving on to part 2, storytelling design tips, where we look at crafting the actual narrative. Now, drawing from research by digital economy whales, we see that you've got to choose your level of control really carefully. Are you triggering discrete, step-by-step motions? Are you letting the user continuously scrub through an animation? Or maybe using a hybrid approach? This choice dictates the entire feel of the journey as your user navigates the content. You've also got some key layout choices to make. A document layout feels a lot like traditional reading, just spiced up a bit, whereas a slideshow layout creates these really distinct, immersive, full-screen chapters. Neither is wrong, you just have to pick the one that actually serves your specific story. And here is a massive tip straight from Magler's analysis of award-winning projects like BMW's annual reports or the Pudding's data journalism. Restraint beats spectacle. Seriously, only animate what amplifies the narrative. If you're covering true crime, keep the pacing deliberate and weighty. If it's a dynamic sports brand like Adidas, pump up the energy. Let the data and the story do the heavy lifting, not the flashy effects. Okay, part 3, developer tricks for scrolling, and how to choose the right tools for the job. A foundational developer trick here, especially if you're using an animation library like GSAP, is scrubbing. Instead of just firing an animation the second an element scrolls into view, scrubbing gives your users direct, organic control. They scroll down, the animation moves forward. They scroll up, it reverses. Throw in a slight smoothing value, and it creates a beautifully polished, organic feel. When you get into complex timelines, the pros have some neat tricks up their sleeves. In GSAP, you can use the batch function to easily handle dozens of elements at once. Also, you absolutely have to use match media for mobile-first experiences, since scroll distances are wildly different on phones. Oh, and definitely remember to kill your triggers before removing elements, or you're going to run into massive memory leaks. But hey, what if you want to skip the heavy JavaScript libraries altogether? According to the MDN web docs, a true game changer is tapping into native CSS scroll-driven animations. These let you link animations to a scroll timeline directly in CSS. They run entirely off the main thread, meaning they are hardware accelerated by the GPU, giving you buttery smooth performance. Now, if you're pushing boundaries into 3D environments with WebGL and Three.js, your secret weapon is normalization. As Digital Strategy Force points out, you basically take the raw scroll position, normalize it to a 0 to 1 parameter, and map that to a 3D camera moving along a predefined spline path. Add a little easing to smooth out the input, and boom, you've got a cinematic 3D journey driven purely by the scroll wheel. Let's dive deeper in part 4, maximizing your scroll performance right under the hood. Listen, if there's a golden rule of web motion, this is it. Absolute discipline. You should only ever animate compositor properties. Your GPU handles opacity, translate, scale, and rotate instantly. But the second you start animating layout properties, like width, height, or margin, you are forcing the browser to recalculate the whole page geometry on every single frame, and that is exactly what kills your frame rate. For heavy 3D scenes, especially on mobile, you need some smart architecture. Start with device tier detection at load. Know how much power you're working with. Then, implement zone-based asset management, so you're only loading and destroying objects when they're actually needed, which keeps memory low. Finally, throttle that render loop. You don't want a mid-range phone catching on fire trying to hit 60 frames per second when 30 is perfectly fine. To optimize the DOM even further, try ditching standard scroll events. Use intersection observers instead to trigger actions only when an element enters the viewport. If you absolutely have to use scroll listeners, make sure they are marked passive so the browser knows you aren't blocking the scroll. And a pro tip, treat your animation code like an isolated island. Budget your timing, like 120 milliseconds from micro interactions, and keep that heavy code out of your critical first paint. And finally, part 5, accessibility and final polish, making sure this works for every user. The A1Y guidebook is super clear on this. It's a strict web content accessibility guidelines requirement to provide synchronized captions and accessible descriptive transcript toggles right inside your layout. It's not just a nice to have, it's a must-have. But it goes way beyond just text. You have got to eliminate any fast flashing or blinking elements to protect users with photosensitivity. Plus, your fancy scroll trickery can never break the natural keyboard reading flow. A screen reader needs to be able to tab through your interactive story just as logically and smoothly as a sighted user scrolls through it. And here's a totally non-negotiable trick from modern web dev. You have to honor the prefers reduced motion setting. For users who deal with motion sickness or vestibular disorders, you must provide a calm fallback experience. That means stripping out the parallax and the scroll jacking, returning the site to a nice standard static reading format. Which brings us to our final thought. As you take these design tips and developer tricks into your next project, look closely at your animations and ask yourself, is this motion actually serving your audience and telling a compelling story? Or is it just draining their battery and taxing the browser? Think about it. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I really hope these tricks help you build faster, more beautiful web experiences.